and gentlewomen, welcome back to Peak Lesbian, an exclusive podcast. I'm your host, Carol. Today I have a very special guest. Her name is AJ. She is one of the contributors to lesbianherstory.com. She came on the podcast to discuss the story Lesbian Perspectives on Queer. That was initially our intention. However, I think we kind of used this story as a jumping off point to just discuss the topic overall. So we don't stick super close to the story. That's okay. But this discussion is going to be about the usage of the word queer to mean anybody who is LGBT or homosexual or lesbian. Queer is taken the place of lesbian in many spaces, and me and her both are on the same page with not liking that and finding some issues with that. So this is what we're discussing today in the podcast. I want to say to all you ladies out there that I appreciate very much your support. Any support is very helpful. It doesn't have to be financial, but if you do want to throw a couple bucks my way, you can become a paid subscriber to my Substack, or you can buy me a coffee. Any little bit is very helpful and appreciated. You can also share the podcast. I actually encourage all of you to share it with anybody you think might enjoy listening. That is the best way, I think, to support the podcast. It's just to get more of this conversation out there. I think every lesbian who can have a platform and talk about the things that she is passionate about is one of the best things we can do for our community at this point. With all of that out of the way, I hope you all enjoy the conversation we had. And here's AJ.
Hello, everyone.
So do you want to give a little bit of an introduction, like a little bit of brief introduction of who you are?
Yeah, so I'm a lesbian from Australia in my early 30s. I'm on the team Lesbian Her Story, the lesbian_her story, or lesbianherstory.com, not to be confused with Lesbian Her Story Archives. And yeah, that's really it.
Okay, yeah. So I love the website. I love the stories that come out of there. So I appreciate your work on that site.
Thanks.
So today we are going to discuss one of the stories actually that is up on the website called Lesbian Perspectives on Queer. I read this and I was like, there's so many good little points in here. I obviously it will be linked so that everybody can read it and then have your own opinions. But yeah, so let's jump in. You're in your early 30s. When did you hear queer being used and how was it used?
When I first came out, it wasn't much. We have Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras here, and I went to that. I think I came out at the end of 2009, and I went to it maybe in 2010, which it's kind of in March, so it was at the beginning of the year, and that was awesome. There was it was mainly lesbian and gay focused because that's what it's supposed to be about. And yeah, I mean, there was all different people with all different beliefs, and I'm sure that some people would have identified as queer, and I'm sure there would be all, different LGBT types, but it just wasn't expected that everyone conformed to that. It wasn't called around me and there, and among my friends, it wasn't called the queer community. And then I went back a few years later, and it was very, very different. I also I was on Tumblr from a not super young age, maybe from 16, 17. And I say not super young because I know some people are on it at like 12.
No, I was gonna say that's young, but I get what
Yeah,
you're
no,
saying
but
because
some
yeah.
people are too young. Yeah. Yeah. And so I guess I had a pretty good idea of when it kind of emerged, because I remember it not really being something that we're talking a lot about on Tumblr. And then, by the time I was in my early 20s, it was becoming more popular. And I guess even back then, I didn't really care so much if people identify as queer themselves, and I still probably don't, because I don't care if people really relate to that. I mean, I think it's internalized homophobia, but I don't really care if people relate to that. In the same way that if people want to self-identify as a bitch or a slut, I can't stop them. It just is what it is. Yeah, so back then, I guess it kind of just come I just felt like it just in my early 20s, that would have been 2013 maybe. I just felt like it just was like this big explosion, and it was just expected that people started using it, I guess. And it's just only
Yeah.
got progressively worse.
I mean, a lot of folks talk about 2015 as being a real tipping point for a lot of stuff that like the trans rights advocate stuff, that's the real bonker stuff where you're like, wait, what? I mean,
Yeah.
great if a guy wants to wear what he wants to wear and identify with women. It's fine, whatever, dude. But like, you're not a woman. Like when shit really tipped over into that
Yeah,
scenario.
I would say it was probably around 2015. Like, now you say that and I think back, I'm like, 2013 was probably a bit soon. I just am not good with years. But yeah, yeah, I agree. I have heard people say that, and I agree that there was kind of like this overnight thing, but then I've heard other people say that in the 90s and early 2000s, queer was being used. I think it was
It
being used,
it
obviously.
was it
But was
was
it you're a little bit older than me, so it was used, but was it expected that everyone used it?
No, not at all. No. This
Exactly, that's
this
the thing.
whole this whole so I am with you on the whole. I hate queer. I hate queer.
Mhm,
And I hate that it is used it, like as the thing to call someone who is homosexual now. Well, actually, we know that it encompasses everything, right? Not just gay people. However, the fact that someone in public could say, "Hey, are you queer?" or "Hey, queer," like just like excuse me? Because I'm 44 and my wife is 3 years older than me. When she and we've talked about this and she said, if you want to reclaim queer for yourself, that's fine, but guess what? She's like, I would even draw this line. You cannot reclaim queer unless you've had a car full of dudes throw a full beer can at your head while screaming it from the window, okay? Because that actually happened to her. I remember in the early 2000s going down to a part of our small city that was the gay area of the small city. And if you were there in the middle of the day and you held hands with your girlfriend, I almost guarantee some dude was going to yell something at you from a car
mm,
or get a dirty look, right? So like these things actually happened to us. And
mhm,
so we are in no rush to reclaim a a negative ass fucking word. Like, no, thank you. Like, it pisses me off. I was sitting, a commercial came on. My son was watching YouTube. A commercial came on with a woman who, to me, looked like she could be a lesbian. Um, it was a banking commercial. It was a bank commercial, and they were talking to her about what it's like to be queer, and I'm just like, I have a commercial that, and my son says he says the word queer then, and he's like, "Queer," and I'm like, I had to then
mhm.
launch into the whole, "Son, we don't say that in our house," right? But here it's so normalized that now you got my kid fucking saying it where he's never heard that mentioned in our house. And anytime I bring this up to other folks that think it's great, like say online, for example, is a big one. I've actually brought it up several times on like reels that pop up, on Instagram, and I'm like, no, I am gonna say something in here. Hi, I'm a lesbian. I'm in my 40s. I don't like being called this. How about I have a right to say what I have to say? I cannot tell you how many times you get just shouted down completely.
Oh, yeah, and the whole thing is that we're just old. That
I don't know what they mean by old though, because here I'm in my mid 40s, but you are in your early 30s, right? There's a difference there. Like you came out and came of age at a different time than I did, and yet you're sitting here going, yeah, no, no, thank you with the queer thing.
No, exactly.
And
Yeah,
I've
well,
actually, and we both, I'm sure we both know lesbians that are actually in their early 20s and younger who don't like it either.
no, a lot of them don't. I honestly think I get a lot of backlash from millennials in particular, me being a millennial myself, saying things like, "Just let the kids have it, it's not that big of a deal. Look at me, I've changed. I'm with it or whatever." And it's a lot of Gen Zs are sending in DMs agreeing. Yeah, when it comes to queer, I actually think that the above 30s and the under 30s have a similar breakdown of who agrees and who doesn't from statistics that I've done.
Okay.
So it's I think that because the actual queer community, and I'm not saying that actually as every LGBT person, I'm saying that as the people that push queer. I think because they're so loud, they act like they're so cool, and you're old news or you're exclusionary or you're too heteronormative if you don't use queer. A lot of Gen Zs use it even though they don't want to.
Yeah. So here's the thing about reclaiming and the fact that, people say, well, it was used back in the day. It was, but it was used for a specific purpose in a specific way, as my understanding goes. Now, I was alive during this time, but I was a teenager, a young teenager. So during the 90s, and this would have been definitely in the big cities in the United States. So San Francisco was a really hotbed for this, and so was New York. When there was the protests and demonstrations because of the AIDS crisis. Okay, you had ACT UP, you had like all these organizations, all these groups, not organizations. They weren't organizations yet. They were just groups of gay and lesbian, bisexual folks coming together to be demand the government actually treat this disease that's killing you know all these people like a disease instead of just the whole, oh, it's just gay people or just gay men, who cares. So that's when this queer started to really be used, right? Because and I heard this from a lesbian, oh, not a lesbian, she's bisexual. I heard this from a bisexual who was actually there during the 90s in San Francisco, and she said that they decided to use queer because it was a way to kind of unite the community around this particular cause, right? So all same-sex attracted people is what it kind of meant then. So that would include the gay men, the lesbians, the bisexuals. Okay, so that queer was a way to kind of, and then another reason to use queer was because it was kind of a way to throw it back in your face and kind of like almost this whole, well, fuck you. Yeah, we are queers. So what? Like, we still should be treated as human. Like, so that's, yes, so there it was used. Okay. Now I know, of course, it's probably in academia, there was a different thing happening. I'm not too familiar with that, but that's my understanding of it. When I came out in 2001, my first step into the gay community at my local place was in my local city was 2001. Queer was not used. Okay, we're talking brick and mortar boots on the ground here, folks. Not online. Um, it was not used. We actually threw it around as a joke at each other often. Like, I'd be like, "Oh my god, look at all those queers over there." Like when you show up at the bar or the club and they'd laugh, they'd be like, "Oh, fuck you." It was like a joke thing.
Right.
No one, dark humor or whatever. No one actually used it that I knew of. Okay? No gay men, no lesbians, nothing. Funny enough, lesbians also didn't use lesbian. No one used lesbian. Everyone said gay. That was it. Gay women, gay men, gay. That was it. And when we get into these things where the accusation of, well, you're just old, you got to get with the program type of thing. Why? Why does your feelings and opinion matter more than mine? By the way, these are the same little shits that keep screaming about wanting to know their elders. Honey, you don't, because your elder's going to kick your ass and tell you to knock your shit off. And that's why you don't want to know your elders.
Mhm. Well, first off, about with the AIDS crisis and queer, I don't disagree with its use there. I think that I understand why it was temporarily used as like, "Fuck you, yes, we are queer then," like, because they were being treated as deviants for because of AIDS, because their sex was seen as inherently, diseased, and I completely understand in that, but I think the difference is, like, actually identifying as queer, like, actually genuinely feeling that you are queer is completely different to, "I'm gonna throw that back in my oppressors' faces when they're treating us this way over something that is connected to our sex lives," which I feel like queer is. The word queer is used because of our sex lives, not necessarily because of how we dress, which I think now it's used in a way, "Oh, look, I'm cool queer because I'm wearing funky clothes and I've got blue hair and a septum piercing." All fashion I like, mind you. I'm not saying that actually is something like or septum piercings are bad or blue hair's bad. I'm just saying that it's not queer isn't a fashion statement. It was used obviously for a very productive purpose. I think it's another example of how academia can actually ruin something. Because if you think about it, I think queer was it early 90s or late 80s it really started getting used, especially by gay men, and then obviously, like you were saying, same-sex people in general to unite over the cause. But then when it really took off in academia in the 90s, that's when it became not just something that, like, "Fuck you, we'll okay, we are queer, then whatever, just give us what we need."
Well,
And it became, like, something serious to philosophize about and theorize about, which I think is
well, I mean, we would be missing something here if we didn't talk about, like, the whole queer theory type stuff that was coming out of academia as well. Like, I think two things were happening, right? And of course things bleed over into each other all the time. People go back and forth, and all this stuff started in San Francisco, right? So all of this is going to be in the same, microcosm.
oh, and I'm not suggesting that, um, that I was there and I 100% know about it, but from what it seems from my research, is kind of like the, LGBT people reclaiming queer for a good reason kinda happened first, and then academia come on top of it and made it into
Mm,
queer. And I think
but
it's another example of something real life happening that actually has meaning, and then once it's kind of gentrified, it's ruined.
mhm. But Judith Butler's book came out before then. Didn't Judith Butler's, big book that changed everybody's, like, idea in academia about queer and gender and stuff, didn't that come out in the 80s? Are you looking it up? I
Look,
think
I
it
just
did.
did not pay enough attention to Judith Butler. But queer being reclaimed like casually before it was being reclaimed during the AIDS crisis, and her book would have come out after AIDS was known to be going around, right?
I believe so, but of course, I haven't done a deep dive on this. Someone's probably gonna be like, I know this."
No, it's definitely
Well,
something I want to read.
regardless, I know that, there's that element too, right? There's the academic element of pushing this, and then definitely into the, I would say, starting to see it in the mid to late 90s. You really start to see the movement of wanting to call everything queer and to queer everything because, I don't know what their reason was. I think what they thought their reason was to unify everything, and then I also think it had an element of being, edgy and cool, right? It was the 90s, everyone wanted to be Nirvana, everyone wanted to be edgy, and so I think it was an element of wanting to be special, desperately trying to be clever. So many fucking folks desperately wanna be clever, and you're like, "Look, maybe you're not clever. Not everybody's clever, maybe we're just average people, God forbid." So I think that that's kinda where it got kicked off too. I know that, um Rachel from Stonebridge Disco has talked a lot about when she's tracked down when that creep happened and really where queer completely took over and did away with lesbian in the academic scene, in papers and books and stuff like that. So it definitely did happen and happened pretty quick.
Hmm.
But all that aside, this gets to something that I love that is mentioned in this article that it opens in the first part, and it's, it says, "Being a lesbian is the least weird thing about me."
Mhm.
And and then, that goes into the whole, queer is by saying queer, by having queer, you're separating yourself out. You're creating this kind of difference, and it's like, "Wait, wasn't the whole movement about not being different?" And yes, it was.
I think for me, it comes back to the fact of okay, so temporarily using queer and reclaiming it for that purpose during a crisis may make sense to me. But for
Mhm,
taking on as a permanent identity, where it becomes an issue is that what is a fact and what is politics can be two different things. And the reality is, like, we are not abnormal. Having same sex feelings is not abnormal whatsoever. Obviously, being a lesbian is a bit more rare. It still doesn't make us queer. Um, and it's normal for everyone to have similar desires as what straight people do. because not every one of those desires are bad.
Yeah.
So what I'm seeing recently, it's kind of like it's heteronormative to wanna have kids, it's heteronormative to want to get married, it's heteronormative to want to not use queer and to wanna use lesbian instead. It's heteronormative to wanna be seen as normal rather than be seen as strange. And at the end of the day, heterosexuals don't own all of that shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
They
Exactly.
don't
Why
own
are we?
the desire to have kids. They don't own the desire to wanna get married. They don't own love. We don't all have to be polyamorous in some underground rave fest. I don't know, like, it's just looking at the facts, we're not that different to straight people. Like, if we
No.
take out all the ways that they've treated us and everything, if we just take all that away from it and just look as facts, the only thing that's different is just that we're only attracted to the same sex, they're only attracted to the opposite sex. That's it. We're not inherently born with all these desires to be strange and weird and deviant.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's made cool, and it's made that's what we should want. We should be trying to subvert absolutely everything that straight people have ever done, which I think just gives them too much merit that they own it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, we all came out of the same culture, right? Like we all come out of the same culture, we're all part of the same culture, even if there's deviation in that culture, because there is, and nothing's like all the same. You know, you still want, if you come out of a culture where you marry one person and you guys raise kids, and that's just kind of the standard norm of your culture, well, what's wrong with you wanting to do that? Like like
Yeah,
um
and obviously there are different feminist arguments for why some women won't want that, and that's a completely different topic, but in terms of solely looking at this through a queer/homosexual lens, I don't understand why we should all be subverting absolutely everything in culture at all times, because I don't know. I don't know if it's like sometimes I think that we get called queer by our own community as if we are like some alien from outer space, which they see as a cool thing. And I just want to be grounded in reality. I don't want to be from outer space.
yeah.
I belong here. And I think that that's what they're not understanding the the fight that I'm making. I'm not surrendering to being heterosexual. I'm claiming that I belong here. I'm claiming my space in this community. In this world. I don't need to be subverting absolutely everything and to be constantly trying to agitate. I can also just say I am I am normal, I am natural, and
Just because I'm a minority doesn't mean I don't belong here, right? Because there is minority in everything, right? There's folks that are um neurotypical, and there's folks that are not. There's folks that have autism, ADHD. There's just a lot of variation in humans across the
mhm.
board. Sexuality is kind of the least part of it in a lot of ways.
And also that's besides the fact that there would be so many more people out there admitting that they have same-sex desire if it wasn't so hated.
So in this story, there's the mention of, oh, I was really surprised to see this, right? Because this is something I've heard so many people fight against, especially lesbians, say that the whole idea that most people could probably be are bisexual or can be bisexual is like, oh no, that's not. Mm-mm. And I get why you would not want that, right? Because that's the same thing that we hear come out of the trans rights extremists oftentimes, is that, well, everybody's bisexual anyway, so you should have no problem if you say that you're a lesbian having sex with a man who identifies as a woman. And so you automatically get all bristly about it. But the story does say that in here. It does basically say, look, uh the scientists are finally jumping, this is from the story quote, scientists are finally jumping on board a theory I've had for many years that most humans are bisexual. I'm a lesbian, a female homosexual, and this isn't me coming out as bi. The point of this observation is that while lesbianism is less common than bisexuality, same sex attraction itself is not queer. It's likely the biological norm. So,
Mhm.
so right there, it's like, I love that middle ground, right? Yeah, a lot of humans are probably bisexual. However, that doesn't mean there isn't humans that are also not bisexual on both
Exactly.
ends.
Yes. Yes. No, I actually I do genuinely think that most humans are bisexual, and that's just from the way that okay, for example, you know when straight people will say, well, and I'm using straight in quotes, um, when they say you're making a choice to be a lesbian, I always picture in their brain there must be 2 options for them.
Ah, yeah. Yeah.
Because why would you think it was a choice unless you thought you made a choice? Like, it's not like they're saying the choice, it's they're not saying, we all don't have the choice." They kinda are saying we all have the choice. And I whereas, like, family members I've got that clearly are heterosexual, they might still be a little bit homophobic, but they didn't have an issue understanding that I could only be attracted to one sex because they are as well.
That's a really good point and something that, this, automatically reminds me of when my coming out conversation with my mother, when my mother basically was like, "So? That's pretty," and she actually said, "Well, it's pretty normal to like women too, just don't do it." And then she tells me a story about how her first, like she had a first, like, love in her late teens with a woman, and I don't think they did anything, but she was, like, totally had a thing out for this woman and just, but she knew, well, for her perspective, she knew it was wrong, so she just didn't go there. I'm just like, "What?"
I've had elderly relatives essentially come out to me as bi saying the same things.
Mhm.
And I just think to myself, sometimes bisexual women get really angry that lesbians don't always trust them. And many of us, me included, have had a lot of experiences with bi women who identify as straight. And I think we need to move past what do people identify as and we need to go to what they are. Because this whole concept that like straight girls can genuinely enjoy kissing each other and get turned on by it, they're not straight.
Yeah.
They can experiment, and if they go, "Oh, I don't like that," then maybe they are straight. But we need to move past that woman's straight, even though she's enjoying having sex or making out with women all the time. It's just she's not straight. I've had a lot of experiences of kind of being approached as an experiment.
Mhm.
And so, for example, with your story with your mum, like not necessarily using her in the story, but just using that story. It's like, what about if the woman that she was, or the girl that she was interested in, really was a lesbian, and there was this deep connection, and then your mum kind of chose the straight life in quotes. That's happened
Which
to me a lot of
happens
time.
all the time. Like,
Happens.
okay, I have yet to meet a lesbian whose first experience, like love or first love experience, sex experience, or whatever you wanna call it, um, wasn't with, quote, "a straight woman" or a straight girl, which I don't think they're like you're saying, I think they're bi, maybe leaning more hetero than bi, but, they're along that spectrum
Yeah,
there. But yeah.
yeah. But then on a survey, like say a national survey went out and it was what sexual orientation are you? They'll put down straight. So when we sit when we're told or 50, say that there's under 10% of America or Australia, less than 10% are not straight, LGB, um, that's an absolute lie because not everyone's going to put down that they're not straight. It's still absolutely taboo.
The bisexual thing, I think if you started to ask people about their actions versus their identity or what they or how they categorize themselves, you would start to get somewhere because actions is different. So
But
we've known just from different studies that have been done over god probably 70, 80 years at this point, that it's very common for boys to engage in sexual activity in their early teens and even in their teens. Even boys that grow up to, for all matters, seems straight, are with women and everything, but it's fairly common. It's not something you talk about, but it is fairly common. It's also seems to be somewhat common for girls to do the same. Maybe it's experimentation. Maybe it's a normal part of finding your sexuality and processing that. I don't know, but we know that that happens. Then you have to ask yourself, look, look how many like okay, so in some of the more conservative, like the Bible Belt in the United States, the more conservative areas, you know, gay porn searches, like gay male porn searches, are really high. And you gotta be like, wait, so there's gotta be a lot of dudes who are into this more than they're admitting, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I just if you've been on if you boots on the ground type of thing, if you've lived long enough and you've seen enough stuff go down, you know that much, much more people are engaging in same-sex activity than admit to it.
Yes. And I think also, like, yeah, sure, it could be experimentation that a lot of teenagers and early 20s have experiences with the same sex, but considering straight relationships are prioritized as what's normal and natural, and considering that same sex relationships are seen as deviant, and we've just spoken about how hard it is even just to hold hands down the street. It is, if you have the choice between men and women, I can understand why women do choose men. But what I don't understand is why they have to keep calling themselves straight when they're actually bisexual. And like I understand the homophobia component of that, but then the opposite kind of happens where you'll get bisexual women calling themselves lesbian just because they are preferring women at the moment and all their friends are lesbian. I just
Yeah,
wish that I'm bisexual.
but there's another side to this coin. If you want everybody to start calling themselves bisexual, then you get a whole bunch of these people that you actually are starting to see now where they're like, "Oh, I'm part of the LGBT community. I'm bisexual. Oh, I've been married to this guy, this handsome man for 20 years. We have 5 kids." Bitch, get the fuck out of here. Like,
Yeah, but I think that realistically she still does belong there.
yeah.
She's annoying.
Uh-oh.
She's annoying and maybe her man shouldn't be there, but if she's
Controversy.
then she does belong. Like, she does belong in LGBT spaces.
Mm.
And I think honestly they'll be less annoying if they see it as less, what's the word? If they feel like they have to compensate for being with a man so much that they do sometimes get annoying when they're with men and go, "I'm bisexual, I'm bisexual, I'm bisexual." I think that they'll feel the need less to compensate for being with the opposite sex if bisexuality was talked about enough, if you know what I mean.
As a norm, yeah. But I don't
Yeah.
know, I just think, like, if you are in a opposite sex relationship, regardless of what your actual attractions are, if it's a committed relationship, then I don't know what the real point is of parading around, bisexuality at that point.
Not necessarily parading it around, but if someone asked you, "What sexual orientation are you?" then I think that ideally you'd say bisexual. And I think that, if you talk about past experiences, I don't think like hide the fact that you've had same-sex experiences or same-sex relationships, which often happens. Like,
Mhm.
you'll get a lot of women, even ones that have previously identified as lesbians, then they go, "Oh, actually now I'm attracted to men," even though it kind of was always there. They just put it to the side because they preferred women at the time and they knew that they were doing that. They just thought that bisexuals deserved the word lesbian as well. Then once they're with men, it's like they've never been with a woman before. So I would take an annoying bisexual married to a man over women who pretend that they're not same-sex attracted any day. Because at the end of the day, my main goal is to normalize same-sex attraction, and it's annoying knowing how many people on earth are same-sex attracted, and I have to hear them call themselves straight. Women that I've, had, experiences with that were real and that were both attracted to each other,
Yeah.
for her to call it straight is disgusting.
I can see that point. I can see your point. I'm not quite sure where I land yet, but I see your point. Because I
And
gotta
that's
say
all.
those bisexual women annoy me.
Oh, no, they annoy me as well, but yeah. Oh, on the action bit, I believe that, well, not that I believe, I recognize that sexual orientation is about attraction, not action, which is
That's true too. That's true too.
how you can get lesbians married to a man for decades because and they don't enjoy any of the sex. They might like him as a friend and that's about it. Sometimes they're best friends, so not every single moment they're together is like the most horrible time ever, but they're obviously not sexually and romantically attracted to them. But the world is still so homophobic, and the idea that lesbians can't still do that now is ridiculous to me. But yeah, she's still a lesbian her whole life. She just forced herself to date or marry or have sex with a man.
That's true. So really, when it comes down to it though, you're still having to trust the person when they
Yeah.
tell you their sexuality. So really, it's still kind of an identity thing in a way. Like, you
Well,
still
I think that if the LGBT community had more if they valued what reality is a lot more, I
Mm.
think it would be easier to trust.
What do you mean?
So, whether it be political lesbians saying, "I'm a lesbian," even though they're bisexual, but they're choosing lesbianism for bisexual for feminist reasons, or whether it be someone identifying as something they're not because they want to be that thing or they feel in their soul they're that thing, or the many, many, many bisexual women who identify as lesbians because they feel like lesbianism is an umbrella term for all same-sex attraction, or whether there's multiple other examples of this, that the community itself has an issue with identifying with what they want to be, not with what they are.
I see what you're saying there.
So,
Yeah.
I know that we have to trust people, but the reason why the reason why I can be untrusting about it and why I look for kind of signs to see, how legit is this person, is kind of to get an idea of all of their politics. Because if all of their politics is like, I'm intentionally agitating, I can be whoever I want to be, I'm fluid, I'm this, I'm that, I'm like, chances are that they're actually a lesbian, probably pretty low, you know?
Yeah. In this story, it basically goes into the whole that while there's a narrative out there that LGBT has been reclaiming queer, if you can reclaim it, something that was never yours. If you can reclaim something that was never yours, which I think is a good point, right? You didn't come up with it; someone else came up with that. But that is kind of what reclaiming is. But anyways, um, since the gay rights movement of the 70s, queer had never, in the last 200 years, been used less in literature than it was from 1970 to 1990. Activists worked against the concept of homosexuality being queer, quote, and the idea there's a global lesbian renaissance today. So, okay, so basically, this the story saying that the queer thing isn't all it's cracked up to be, but the whole lesbian renaissance thing, what is that about? Like, I didn't.
So in especially London at the moment, there are a lot more lesbian bars being opened, a lot more lesbian nights. There are a lot of lesbian things happening there right now, and I think that there's more lesbian TV shows, etc., etc. But my point here is that if you look at the use of the word lesbian, even though there's pockets of some good stuff happening,
Yeah,
it still shows that queer is, lesbian's still declining. I mean, I'm looking at the graph now, and
yeah.
you know, at its lowest is what it was in what since 1990 was the last time lesbian's been used this little. Is that correct?
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm just looking at the
I'm not
smaller
looking at
version.
that. I'm like now I'm second guessing myself. But anyway, yeah. So obviously the actual word isn't being used
No, and
as
I
much.
agree. You don't hear it. Like the fact that I use it is I'm the only one that says it other than my wife. Like I don't hear anybody else say it. So yeah, it's definitely not used. And but yeah, lesbian hasn't been used for a while. Like I said, when I came out, it was gay. We didn't use lesbian. Lesbian was seen as old. And
Mhm.
also it had a lot of porn attached to it, and so I think lesbian just was something you wanted to stay away from. For me, actually, it was too on the nose.
Mhm.
It was too direct, it was too in your face. I couldn't use lesbian. Gay seemed to soften it for people.
Mm.
And so that's from my feeling, that's why I used gay instead of lesbian, because it seemed too much for me to say.
Yeah, no, I agree. And sometimes, honestly, especially if I'm just having a bout of just not caring enough to deal with homophobes, sometimes I still occasionally use queer. At work, I do because I feel like I want to be seen purely professional, and I feel like the word lesbian for me, when it's used in front of men, still has that connotation. Oh, I watched that porn last night. Now I'm looking at you that way. And
Well, I mean,
I feel like
you're
gay
never
kind
gonna
of
get
softens
a
well enough that I know that that's not what they typed. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Oh,
it
yeah.
doesn't
I mean, you're never gonna
get
get away
anywhere.
from that, though.
No, I know, but I also don't care enough about the men at work to give them what I really am.
That's true. That's true.
Like, it's not gonna change anything. Like, me saying I'm gay is like me being out enough, but it's doing it in a desexualized way because they don't get the satisfaction of picturing me in the porn they watched the night before. And I'm not saying that that's correct. I'm just saying that at work, it's just about me getting through the day. and coming out as gay at all at work is pretty good, you know. Um, I think with the word lesbian for me, it's something that I do intentionally try and use as much as I can. And I did go through a period actually recently where I was kind of thinking, because a few people who want to call themselves lesbians, even though they're bisexual, they kind of come up with this, I don't know whether to call it a theory or a fake fact, that lesbian really came out of the 70s and it's tied to political lesbianism, and it's tied to bisexuals being able to use it as well. And my friend and I were looking through some old poetry and stuff, and Elsa Gidlow, who I don't know if she was a yeah, she was a poet, a journalist, philosopher, and humanitarian. She died in 1986. She was born in 1898. She was using lesbian to mean like female homosexual. And I think she even mentions like a definition like that. Like she's not including male attraction. She was doing that in the early 1900s.
She was using lesbian.
Yeah.
Do you know when, since you do a lot of research for the site, do you know when lesbian first kind of started to be used?
So technically, I think it was first coined in the late 1800s, and so was bisexual. So
Okay.
this idea that kind of lesbian was used first because there wasn't a word for bisexual, it's actually incorrect. They were both kind of coined around the same time. Um, in some people sometimes have the argument that scientists came up with the term like homosexual, and that's why it's a bad term. I think that the scientists' interpretation of homosexuality and treating it as some disease was the problem. But homosexual, like the act, when you break down the actual words, I'm only saying this because this all kind of happened around the same time. Um, when you break down the word homosexual, it doesn't have any bigotry in it.
Yeah, it's just it's describing. It's
Yeah, yeah. If there was any sort of kind of, um, I don't know, if they try and put in like deviance or something in there to make it like it is a disease or something, then that might be a bit different. But yeah, that all kind of happened around the same time. Like lesbian and bisexual, there was a lot more terminology for surrounding same-sex desire in general. And yeah, sure, it was used a lot for research,
Mhm.
but I don't think it's always bad to research homosexuality.
One of the big issues I have with queer is that it has no clear definition. It conveys no clear meaning to somebody. And for me, I really my like philosophical take on language is that language is meant to create boundaries, and it's specific, right? Um and we have to agree on meaning or else everything is chaotic.
Mhm.
So when you say queer, that can mean lots of things, and I would prefer that that not be used. I mean, I don't like it because of like the negativity slur situation, but also because it's not clear. Why are we doing away with everybody's own personal experiences, right? Like I came up in started to vote in politics and the liberal left and everything when the idea of different folks valuing everybody as equals but also recognizing their differences and that differences aren't bad. Now it's almost like difference is bad and we have to pretend that nobody's different and nobody has different needs, or nobody, or the differences don't require maybe different spaces, or for those people to be on have their own community. So like, you know, in the LGBT community, it's fine if you want to have LGBT and you want to include everybody, that's fine. However, why can't we still acknowledge that lesbian has some things that are going to be different than gay men. Actually, we have a lot that's going to be different than gay men. We have different needs and different things going on and different desires than a bisexual woman. We have different stuff going on than a trans identified person. Like why can it not be separate still in certain instances but come together in others?
Yeah. And you know what the weirdest part is that ultimately, the typical queer person who's pushing that, um, the interesting part is that the core concept of queer is based on difference, but it's the difference between heterosexual heteronormativity and the non-normative. So in some ways they love difference. They're like, yeah, we're so cool because we're different and we're strange and let's fuck shit up because we're so subversive. But when it comes to differentiating those inside the quote unquote queer community, so the LGBT, when we start talking about the differences inside it, they see it as divisive. So what that
Now,
does.
you've had probably more conversations than I've had
Mm,
with folks on with a different opinion on this subject. What do they say if,
mm,
like what I just said, what would their comeback to me be when I say, well, look, lesbian is its own thing. It's, yes, we're part of the LGBT community, but in certain situations, we should have our own space and our own thing going on where
well,
the others aren't.
I the idea of queer now, like, so removing it from its origins as being useful in a political struggle, how it's used now is to de-homosexualize people and to make them more bisexual. So they don't see the need for lesbianism to have a definitive meaning and for us to organize as a class on our own. They see now that lesbians have kind of pushed back and been like, no, lesbian it is an important word and blah blah blah. They are kind of coming around to lesbian a little bit, but it has to include bisexual women. It has to include anyone who wants to be a lesbian. It
Yeah.
can't have a real meaning. So let mostly obviously lesbians because we're women and we're homosexual, but also gay men are really pushed into this corner where we are guilted. It's kind of like you've got younger siblings and you're a teenager. Like you just want to be in your own room and have your own space, but your parents keep kind of pushing the younger siblings into your room and they keep trying to copy you and you just want to have your own identity and do your own thing, but then you keep getting guilted. Oh, but Jackie's just looking up to you. They just want to be you. They just, you don't need your own space. You just need to babysit this kid all the time. It kind of feels like that. It feels like having a younger sibling that just constantly won't leave you alone, and you're kind. But the difference is we're both adults. We're all adults actually in this situation, but our
Yeah.
boundaries are pushed. We are guilted in from more ways than one. Whether it be from trans people, bi people, even feminists. When it comes to lesbian label,
Yep.
we are pushed in so many directions to be inclusive, even if it's people who say that they're anti the queer community, they still are pushing for us to be inclusive. They just don't use the word inclusive because they see it as a buzzword tied to queer theory. Um,
Oh, the inclusive thing. Oh my God. It
it's
just drives me.
different. So
It's such a childish fucking
mm,
conversation, right?
yeah,
They get stuck on that word. You're supposed to be inclusive because that's the good thing. Yes, well, you get the gold star for being inclusive. Well, what does inclusive mean? Just be inclusive.
actually, and
Like,
also, how is it being inclusive of us and our idea, like who we are?
mhm.
How is it being inclusive of us if we're supposed to sacrifice that and surrender it to be inclusive of others? How does that make any sense?
Well,
Because that's
again,
unfair.
they not to go too far off topic, but queering everything is also a kind of a philosophical movement and a cultural movement that's happened too, where it's like, let's make everything blurry so that it gets rid of all the bad parts that are in there. Guess what? Making shit blurry just makes it blurry bad shit. It doesn't fix anything. So much of like the whole, real trans radical queer type movement stuff is really homophobic and anti-woman, and it does this thing where it's like oh, this, it's like this, I'll use an analogy, this car doesn't run, so we're going to give it a new paint job.
Mhm.
Well, it's not fixing the car. So like for example, so many of the women and lesbians especially who identify as non-binary, okay, hun, identifying as non-binary is not going to fix the car. You put a new paint on, right? You're trying to cover what's really the issue. The issue is you're female and there's a reason that you feel uncomfortable that way. There's a reason you get shit for that, and it's not because of how you identify, it's not because how you feel about yourself, it's not how you would how, you even dress or look to other people. It really is that you're female. That's it. That's the whole story.
And you can't identify out of the struggle. Once non-binary lesbians identify as non-binary, I feel like they separate themselves into a different category where they're no longer women, and then they can turn around and they can point and laugh. And because they do say more misogynistic things, and I understand that it's actually trying to separate them as the victim in it and trying to become, you know, one of the boys in a way. Um, but the issue with that is that we're not getting to the root of the issue that would actually let us all escape.
Yeah.
Instead of identifying something different and turning around and laughing, it would actually probably help if we all actually tried to change the expectations. Because at the end of the day, you know, for anyone, I'm assuming most of your listeners would obviously already know this, but at the end of the day, like it's just, male and female have expectations forced on them, but they're
Yeah.
not born more, when people say, oh, but I don't feel like a woman or a man, so I'm non-binary, it's like, but the only way that you could feel that way is if you saw the expectations forced on the sexes, otherwise called masculinity and femininity. You saw those things as inherently tied to the sexes. So when you're not identifying as either, you'd have to kind of agree that women must be lesser than
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
see that they are.
Well, the other part of this, though, is that a lot of times the non-binary is just, a an updated version of what we used to say was androgyny. Like, androgyny was real big when I in the late '90s when I came out, the androgynous stuff, okay? So, I see some women use non-binary in that very androgynous kind of way. That's the way they're thinking about it. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Like, in that case, it makes sense. Like, if that's just another way to say you're androgynous, like that's great. But it's the tying it to like actual like biological reality that gets real fucked up because it's like, no, non-binary does it. That's just maybe you could be non-binary in your clothing, maybe or something like that, but you can't be non-binary in your actual existence as a
Yeah.
person.
I think that
Oh.
I think if it wasn't tied to pronouns, then it would just mean androgyny.
Oh, well, I guess that's true, huh?
Yeah, but I think because it's tied to pronouns as well, I think that's where, like, I've had a lot of people talk to me and they'll say I'm non-binary, but then they really hold on close to the to lesbian, and they'll put like they/she pronouns. So it's really like they're not really changing much. They just
And I suspect that some lesbians do it just to fit in.
mm,
Like, everybody's kinda doing something, so they're like, "Well, I'm not gonna go, cut my tits off and take testosterone, but hey, I'm non-binary, guys, I'm part of the group." I think there's a lot of that happens too.
yeah, I think so, and I also think that they probably don't feel like they belong anywhere because women are so expected to be so hyper feminine, and the answer to that, to remedy that from the queer community, and I use that not as everyone that's LGBT, just like the people that actually identify that way. Um, the way that the queer community remedies that is to identify as non-binary. It's not to think about your place in the world as female and how that is going to affect you and make you hate yourself and other women. Um, but the world obviously, like I was talking to a relative the other day and we were discussing um what's I was basically saying like it's been proven that brain sex isn't real. So males and females have got the same brain. We're socialized to behave differently, and that's how we end up behaving so differently. And it's already been proven in so many different um studies that when humans are given power, they run with it. So that's what oppressors do. They run with the power that they're given and then they start behaving really disgustingly. And she was saying that she thinks that women are born more nurturing and they do gravitate to the dolls and they do this. And like she's not someone that actually is super conservative or anything. She was just saying that in her experience of having kids, girls do gravitate to that stuff. And I kind of had to keep pulling her up and saying, but you're not actually supplying them with alternatives. And she was like, yeah, sometimes we'll put a truck there and she'll keep going to the Barbie. And I'm like, people really underestimate conditioning. Really, really, really underestimate it. And this is the thing. I even said to her, because she understands what I'm saying with the people should be identifying with what they are rather than what they wanna be. And I said to her, "How can I blame trans people for identifying as the opposite sex with what, you and many other people believe? How can I blame them?"
Yeah.
And obviously there's fetishists, which are a completely different
Mhm.
story.
Yeah.
But how can I blame them when someone like her who she understands everything we're talking about. She understands, like, why I don't or identify as what you want to be, why not just be proud of who you are. But you're also telling people that you think that women naturally gravitate towards things like pink and Barbies and nurturing and being nurturing and stuff. So you're actually doing kind of the very thing that pushes people to identify as trans in the first place. And that's the reason why I don't have a lot of hatred towards them, to be honest, unless they're male fetishists.
Mhm.
Actually have a lot of empathy towards gay men that transition, and they usually leave us alone to the most point. They don't give a fuck about lesbians. The actual gay men transitioning and stuff, it's sad.
Oh,
It
yeah, yeah.
it doesn't make
It's a
me
different beast than the straight men who do it.
yes, and it's sad to me. It doesn't make me angry, and it's the same thing with females.
Mhm.
It actually I used to get so angry, and now I just think, like, honestly, I can't even blame you that much because everyone I know, even no matter what their position is on the topic, they still believe that there is a natural connection between the expectations forced on the sexes and the sexes themselves. And
Yeah.
sometimes even radical feminists do still believe in that connection. It comes out in different conversations that they actually do believe in gender in some respects.
Well, I mean, the fact is we don't really know. That's basically what we could say, is that we don't really know if it is something that is somewhat innate or not. We can't be
But
sure. So,
we know that the brains have been proven to be exactly the same.
well, from what I understand, it's not necessarily a hard and fast proved yet. It's just it's been real kind of back and forth, and it's not been solid in any which way. So it's like you can't really say for sure
But
because
if
there's
we
just too much um I get not controversy, but there's been too many different things that have come out of these studies.
There was a book I read called Delusions of Gender by Cordelia Fine, and she goes into, like, all of these studies to prove that, she said the sexism, I think it's well, how does she say? Basically, she's talking about the sexism of neuroscience and how there actually are no I think she's a scientist herself, and there are no, differences. And obviously that can be contested and stuff, but if we are to say that there is some, like, just say that it was contested, or just say that we still believe um, that there is some kind of natural gender to the sexes, and a lot of the expectations are more innate than what we think, then that means trans can exist then.
I don't think so. Not
I
at
think
all.
it yeah, well, yeah. I
Not at
disagree.
all. Not at all if you look at it from evolutionary kind of standpoint, right? Like we are a sexually, dimorphic species. We have male and female. It has to exist that way for a reason. We have to raise young. Our young stay vulnerable for many, many years. Um, females are not as strong and able to do physically what males can do. It makes sense that there would probably be some wiring in there evolutionarily to for females to be maybe more nurturing. Let's go there. Let's just go there and say maybe because we are having the babies and we are raising the young. We are
Are we
primarily responsible for that aspect.
but are we conditioned to be more nurturing because of that biological capability?
Yes, that too.
Because that's the thing, like, like with my relative the other day, she's saying that she thinks her kids just naturally gravitate towards, baby borns and
No.
all those. It's
Eh,
like that is
well,
the nurturing thing though. It does lead into the gender, and why different toys exist for kids really does come down to these are your two roles. Women, you've got the nurturing one. You just go pop out the kids because that's what you're designed to do, which I also don't believe is a hard and fast rule in terms of yes, we have the capability, even if we have medical issues such as myself, who if I wanted to have kids, would probably have fertility issues. I'm still female. That was like, that's um, a condition. Um, but I don't think just because we can have babies, we're made to have them. And I think that that's where like the nurturing side kind of comes in. I think that, there might be different hormones that are released when we're pregnant and when we've recently had a baby that can make us behave more nurturing because it's like an instinct sort of thing. But I think
Mhm.
outside of that event of having that baby, and potentially like what happens raising the child, you probably still keep that nurturing capability because you love this baby, obviously, in ways that men kind of have been taught that they can just take off and go to work and go to drink with the boys and they can go watch football and stuff. Um, I think the fact that over the last few decades, especially, men have stepped up as fathers, I would say, like, not necessarily all of them, obviously, but,
Not to the level we'd like to see, but
no, exactly, but, I mean, most men in my family, like, if I look at the boomer generation and older, all of those men never came home, they were off drinking, they just
yeah.
thought their role was just to go to work and then to go off and drink. They have no connection with their kids even now. Whereas in my family, a lot of the dads are encouraged and very much are more nurturing than the women. It
Ah.
just maybe it's my own experience with my own family and stuff, but it's encouraged my family for men to participate in raising the children, changing their nappies and stuff like that. So I don't know what came first. Was it that those men were just naturally more nurturing than other men, which I don't think so because they all come from completely different backgrounds. Or once they came together and married into our family, they became more nurturing because it was expected of them as part of their role in the family.
Well, I mean, this is where it gets real sticky because culture means so much. Like, you know, there is other cultures and different cultures where men and women do not have real strict defined roles like Western culture does, right? Or, even throughout history, there's been cases where both men and women equally share in the responsibility and ruling and judgment of the village as well as family members, and also this whole idea that it's one man, one woman, and they go off together and have kids is such a new thing. Like throughout human history, humans have lived in villages and tribes for the most part where everybody was doing stuff, right? It wasn't just a man and a woman and the kids. It was, maybe all the women got together to do some, all the men, and then all of them came together for something else, and everybody raised each other's kids. So there's also that aspect too. I'm not saying that it's I agree with you. It is not, I don't believe it is as set in stone or as prevalent as people make it sound like. Like the biology is not going to make a girl pick a Barbie over a truck. No,
Mhm.
and that's too far. I'm saying that there might be a hint of biology there, but people have taken the hint of it and then blown it out of proportion and mandated people behave along these boundaries. Like, for
Mhm.
example, the idea that men are more aggressive than women. Well, there might be a biological reason why males might be more aggressive than women, and testosterone does probably play a role. However, there's a big leap between saying, yes, biologically there is some difference. We see this in animals too. Um, Versus going, well, that's why he likes sports and drives cars and fucks other women and doesn't want to have anything to do with the kids. No, that's cultural,
Yeah.
And I'm with you because my mother was not nurturing in the least bit. She was horrible. My father, on the other hand, from what I heard, because he died when I was very young, but he was fighting to get full custody of me. And he was the one who took me everywhere. And he was like even my cousins that are like, what my cousins actually were his age because my grandma had him super late. My cousins were like, he was our favorite. He was always playing with the kids. He was always out with the kids. He was nothing like his brothers and his dad. So like, so I'm with you. Like, I'm not saying that there can't be that, but I guess I don't think we can really say it's one or the other. I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's a little bit of it's both, but I think our culture definitely plays probably a much bigger role than the biology plays.
Yeah, well, like, just say like, I guess I in a way, like, when I was saying about the pregnancy aspect, like, obviously, there are things that our body does to make sure that we don't kill the baby. So I
Well,
understand
until you have it, and then you get postpartum, and
that I actually want to, yeah,
I mean,
because
that's
dad's fucked off and he's not helping raise the child and all that sort of stuff.
that sometimes
Um,
happens.
yeah. Um, no, but then obviously that's something that needs to be treated if it does. But what I mean is that, like, our body obviously is supposed to produce things that do help us not kill the baby. So that has like a biological reason, obviously. But I just don't think that outside of pregnancy it matters that much. So even just say, like, say for example, like testosterone does make men more aggressive, which sure there's like I'm sure that there's evidence out there that that's possible to a degree. But the how aggressive does it make men? Like you were saying before, like that being like a dash of truth doesn't explain the overuse of that as like the evidence behind the gender expectation being real.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that even if what you're saying is right, which I do think it does have elements of truth to it, it is so minimal in importance. Like those slight differences of like our body acting differently based on testosterone, estrogen, whatever. Um, I think that the differences are so minimal that if we gave them too much credibility and spoke about that too much, that then gender just becomes more real, and then the trans thing happens again. Do you know what I mean? So even if
No, no, I
that
I I
might come
agree.
across.
And no, we are absolutely here in this place right now precisely because of this way of thinking that it's biologically driven that, boys want to punch each other in the face and drive fast cars. That's it's not necessarily the facts. And I share your frustration because there's been many conversations I've had where, people will act like there's really not this big of separation between male and females. And I'm like, have you walked inside a fucking store recently and looked at the clothing section? Because
Mm,
I'm sorry, but like, I use Target as an example because all their fucking clothing is like right up front. But like, you go in there and it's like, there is such a vast difference between the girls' clothes and the boys' clothes. And I don't mean just color. I mean,
mhm,
cut, style. Girls' clothes are always exposing the female body more than men's clothes, and it starts almost at birth. Why?
mhm.
Why are male children and male babies and then males allowed to cover their bodies and females are not? What
No,
why
exactly.
does why can I not have an actual full short sleeve shirt and in a feet if it's labeled for women? Like, you know how the shirts get, like, cut up? It's just less fabric. It fucking pisses
And
me off.
they're never long enough. They're never long enough. They're always like
Yeah,
midriff.
and then
Mm,
let's not even get into fucking pockets, people.
mhm.
You know, so there's it just go look at the toy section too. There's such a division, right? And they divide and there's even it's color coded too, right? And that's so colors just it means nothing. But
Yeah.
you have a whole fucking aisle of pink just blazing you in the face, and that's what girls are supposed to get, and you have all the whole aisle of blue, and that's the boys are gonna and it's still like this, folks. I actually think it was a little better when I was a little kid in the '80s than it is now.
It is. I've read a lot of things that it actually took off the way it is now, really took off in the 90s.
I believe it.
Because, there was hypercapitalism, consumerism, all that stuff. If they could make it more separate between what boys should do and what girls should do, they could sell it. You need to market
Exactly, more s
it.
yeah, why would you know what, that's a good point. Why would you want them to play with the same toy when you could split that, make a it's like fucking Lego and their pink Legos, right? You know,
Mm,
"Oh, these are the girl Legos." Like, I know they're trying to be, like, not that way about it, but they are kinda being that way about it too, where it's like, "Wait, why not just sell Legos in all the
yeah,
colors?" You know?
yeah. I used to work at a car store, just, like, sold spare parts of cars and air fresheners and stuff like that. I needed a job, and, we used to sell tools, and
Oh god.
it'd be like the just regular black tools that are the same size, could physically be used by both men and women, and then they'd always have, like, the pink set.
Oh my god. Yeah, I
That's for
know,
the women.
I know.
And I also work in a place that a lot of women are doing, some tough jobs, like, as in, like, outside working class jobs, and, some of them have pink boots, and it's just like, "Why do you need the pink work boots?"
It's to
Like
signal that you're still playing your proper role.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Don't worry, I'm still beneath you. I am still a woman.
Yeah. Yep. No,
Uh,
that's the thing, and I think that, gender has been spoken about a lot through a feminist lens, but I don't think it has enough through a homophobic lens,
right.
and I think that the core of what we're talking about in general with gender and identity, the core of the issue is that, yes, gender is partly about women are lesser than men and men are superior, so let's let the men do all the tough stuff and let the women do all the service work for the strong men. But the other side of it is women are there to be fucked by men and men are there to fuck women. So that's why you've got little girls having barely any material on their clothes because they're being prepared, they're being groomed to be like, look at my reproductive ability. Like this is where the baby's going to be kept. These are my legs. Like picture what I'm going to look like. That all comes back to reproduction. I believe that both homophobia and misogyny are different axes of oppression, but both of them are rooted in reproduction. So misogyny says women are there to have babies, and therefore they're there to um, bear the male's sperm or whatever, and he's really the god in the situation, and she's there just to harbor him. Whereas I think homophobia is also rooted in reproduction. That heterosexuality is normal and natural because our main purpose on earth is to reproduce.
Yeah.
And even though now IVF, IUI, all those sort of things, turkey based or whatever, now, yeah, obviously we can have babies, but us being born without the capability of attraction to men does not compute because women are born to be fucked by men because reproduction is what we're apparently here for. We're supposed to reproduce. And in all honesty, I think we've had this conversation before, but when I was in my early teenage years, I thought I was straight, but I thought that all women pretended to be attracted to men because I thought that it only made sense, humans being animals like any other, that we would be born to reproduce and continue the species. I think a lot of homophobia is comes from the same place. It's not necessarily as evil as what we think it is. I think people just can't understand how an animal could have non-reproductive capabilities with their sexual orientation.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
No,
just
I hear
doesn't make
you.
sense. So I think
S-
that's the root of it, and then where all the fucked up shit comes after that. But the root of homophobia, I honestly think, is that. And
mhm.
I've been around a lot of feminists who think that homophobia is just an offshoot of misogyny. Misogyny is the root of the problem, and homophobia isn't separate, but actually comes under misogyny. That's a lie. Misogyny and homophobia are there. They cross over. They're related. They're siblings. They're both related to reproduction, but it's not that misogyny is worse and homophobia just comes under that. They're both separate, even though they're linked.
And I could see how the idea of homosexuality would be scary to the idea of it, it would be scary to think that there are people that won't reproduce because I think that is such a biological drive in humans, like just the human consciousness as a whole, right? Like you have to perpetuate the species. Even though
Exactly.
it's like, no, actually we don't now. Everybody needs to chill the fuck out. We got too many people on, on
Yeah.
the earth.
Maybe if humans were dwindling on Earth, maybe less of us would be born homosexual
Mm, yeah. I mean,
because Mother
homosexuality,
Nature. Sorry.
I was gonna say homosexuality exists for a reason, just like every other variation exists for a reason. It plays some role somewhere.
Exactly. And I mean, look at the amount of children given up by heterosexuals, or you know, in there are a lot of there's a lot of natural normal reason for homosexuals to be born. And like I said, if the human population was dwindling so far, I'm pretty sure nature would just make less of us born homosexual, and then we'd build up the population again. But for now, it
Okay,
doesn't really
so
matter. I
so
don't think humans need to reproduce more right now anyway. So why would we be made with the reproductive attraction?
okay, so tie this back into how queer is a problem. Because I think it ties in there a little bit, and you
It does.
kind of hinted at it.
Yeah, it does, because queer says we are weird and heterosexuals are normal, and let's just reclaim our weirdness, because they do. What they're saying is basically, homophobes have a point. We are not what's normal and natural, so let's just not give a fuck about what is normal and natural. And it's not true. We are normal and natural. There's nothing wrong with not being attracted to the reproductive sex that we're
And
apparently.
queer, I also think, and it says this a little bit in the story, that queer, in place of lesbian, it kind of lends to a fluidity and an openness, right? It breaks down that boundary, that exclusionary. There's that bad naughty word, that
Mm,
exclusionary thing that is lesbianism and is homosexuality. Homosexuality, period, is it has there is exclusionary stuff happening there. We exclude the opposite sex. They do not.
this is this is actually on topic of what really kind of pisses me off when homosexuality is equated with bisexuals in terms of experience, as in, like, just say a just say a just say a bisexual's been in a relationship with a woman for 40 years and wants to call herself a lesbian. People will say, why can't she? She's been with this woman for 40 years. Why can't she call herself a lesbian even though she's attracted to men? What still is different, besides the fact that she's attracted to men regardless, what is still different in terms of our experience in the world is that she rests at night knowing that she is attracted to the reproductive sex she's supposed to be.
Mm,
And that
yeah,
is
she's
different
she's
to a lesbian
yep.
experience. She's still normal. Like, the fact is, society's fine with casual same sex desire. As in, a lot of homophobes have threesomes. Let's be real. Like,
Yeah.
they are fine with casual same sex desire as long as attraction to the reproductive sex you're supposed to be in order to reproduce exists, because then they just see same sex desire as something fun we do on the side. That's not how I think all bisexuals see it. I'm saying this is what, like, heteropatriarchy sees it as. Same sex desire is something fun that you do on top of the serious work, which is male and female relations in order to reproduce. So,
No, that was definitely a feeling I got when I was about 18 or 19 and figuring it out. Um, I came out well, in my generation, fucking we all homosexuals came out as bisexual first because bisexual was okay. It was easier than coming out and saying, "Actually, no." When I came out as bisexual with my friend group, it was cool. I was cool. When I finally came out as lesbian, not so
yeah.
much. Not so much. That's when the shit really hit the fan. Can you
Yeah.
believe such a difference? I mean,
I mean, it's not shocking when you think about it, because if people see, especially non what they call us, monosexuals, the one when people are attracted to both sexes, I think that because they think that that's true for everybody, they see lesbians as making a conscious choice to exclude men. So then that's why, that's why we get the man hating thing. And then the other side of it is also that bisexuals look at us like we're trying to compete for the most gay.
okay.
Well,
Well, just so everybody
my,
knows, I
that's been
am the
my
most gay. No.
but that's been my experience. Is if someone doesn't believe that homosexuality exists and that sexuality is fluid, which we get told all the time, sexual orientation is fluid, which it's not.
Yeah.
Um, then when you do call yourself homosexual, when you say lesbian now, people let you say that sometimes because they expect that you're including bisexuals in that. Don't know why. But when you say, no, I mean homosexual, I mean I'm not attracted to men at all. That's when the whole, oh, you're just trying to compete for the most homosexual, like the most gay, like you're dividing us. Why can't we just all kiss and make out and get over it and all this stuff? And I'm like, what is wrong with me explaining the fact that I'm not attracted to men? Why does that upset you, a bisexual woman, so much? I
Why
think that there's
why
some, I think that there's some insecurity in it, especially if they're feminist. I think that there is some insecurity in being attracted to men, that they actually don't like being attracted to them. So when we say that we're not, it's kind of like they feel like we're privileged for not being attracted to them, when it's much deeper than that, and homophobia exists. And um not having the attraction to the sex we're supposed to in order to reproduce and do what we're all taught is what humans are supposed to do. That is a very big deal. We're not just running away and creating, some feminist sisterhood away from men on
Hmm.
purpose.
Well, that's a whole nother topic, which maybe we'll do.
Yes. And that's why
Uh,
they hate butch men.
the whole fucking feminist, like, well, radical feminist side of this, the political lesbian, the all that bullshit, the whole.
Hating
So
on butch men because
uh,
they see lesbianism as feminist in nature and that we should all be equal, and that
feminist in nature.
even though they say that they're against gender, they equate butch and femme relationships with men and women.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's weird. It's a weird universe. So I would say that there is a lot of layers to why queer is being used. I mean, I think we've touched on pretty much all of them at this point. You know,
I
and
think honestly where it comes down to is just that it's kind of like, not to use a dark example, but when a woman has experienced some sexual violence, sometimes she goes through a period of becoming very sexual as a way of controlling the narrative. And I think that's honestly where this started. Do I think that people are I don't think everyone that's identifying as queer is even same sex attracted. I think a lot of them are just doing it because they just want to be cool and different and they identify more with the punk side of things and the oppressive side of things. But I think at the core, I have a lot of empathy for where this started because I think it does come from you've thrown, you've been violent towards me my whole life, called me queer. So what if I am? In the same way women do that with sexuality when they've been targeted.
yeah, I mean, my major issue with it is I don't want it to be used as a blanket term. That's it. I just think it's not logical. There's a lot of good arguments not to do it. It erases other people's identities, and I thought that's very important that we don't raise other folks' identities to, have our own, right? And it's okay to have difference and we should celebrate difference. I'm very old school that way. We should celebrate our differences and value them and not act like we don't have differences.
No, exactly. And I think in the queer movement's mind, they are celebrating difference by making it um, the heterosexuals versus the rest of us. Or I should say now they'll say it's like the monogamous heterosexuals because now poly people can apparently be queer as well. Um, they do think that they're celebrating difference, but they're not because they're seeing it as like an us versus them, normal and weird, rather than diversity doesn't look like two different types of people that are against each other. It
Yep.
looks like a very big array of beautiful differences, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that that's why lesbians suffer so much with it being the monogamous heterosexuals versus the rest of us. We suffer because if we don't submit to fluidity, then we're seen as exclusionary, not just to men, males, but also we're seen to be excluding bisexuals from our own terminology, our own culture, our own identity, who we are, which that shouldn't necessarily be a bad thing, but it is. And I think that the core of the queer movement at the moment, I feel like, is just a push to normalize bisexuality.
Hmm.
Except they'll call it queer instead of bisexual because bisexual admits there's two sexes.
So then you're still not normalizing anything.
No. But then they think that they're normalizing difference by anything goes. But they're not normalizing difference by they don't believe normalizing difference means defining things. They believe normalizing difference means undefining things.
This has been a good conversation. I look forward to, I hope some women comment, give your opinions. Head over and read the material and the stuff that's on lesbianherstory.com because it's a good site. So go support that site if you can. And thank you so much for listening.